Hello and welcome to today's Quick Start, titled High Availability Storage for VMware vSphere. Hello, my name is Greg Shields, and in addition to being a Microsoft MVP as well as a VMware vExpert, I'm also a partner with Concentrated Technology at concentratedtech.com. I've been asked by StarWind Software to talk with you today a little bit about some of the different high availability storage options that are available for VMware vSphere. And because we're here on behalf of StarWind, we're going to talk a lot about the software-based solutions for VMware vSphere, specifically iSCSI SAN software. Now, iSCSI SAN software has actually been around for a long time, but you may be thinking to yourself, well, SAN software? When I think of a SAN, I think of these large refrigerator-sized devices that have lots of disks in them, or maybe even a small, but still, 2, 3, 4U device that I've put a bunch of disks in, and then I connect to. When I think of SANs, I think of hardware. Well, I want to spend some time today and talk with you about iSCSI SAN software, because really you could argue that some of the features that are available in iSCSI SAN software really make them ready for production vSphere use. Let's talk a little bit about what really makes up a SAN. Let's deconstruct what a SAN is. What really goes into that giant refrigerator box that you may have in your data center today? What really makes up the storage area device that you're using? Well, in that storage area device, you've probably got a set of disks, right? Those disks are the storage that makes up the storage area network. You've probably got a bit of firmware or some piece of software actually that manages that SAN and actually handles connecting servers and users into that SAN. And then speaking of connections, we also have to have some sort of connection medium as well. We have to have some sort of way of connecting those servers into that SAN. And that SAN's probably got a nice label on it as well, although the label sometimes is what ends up costing you the most. Well, if this is a SAN, well, what really makes a traditional SAN or a hardware SAN? If we're thinking again of those giant refrigerator boxes, what's inside that box? Well, that set of disks that we talked about, right? Those are disks that you buy from a SAN vendor. Those disks, now depending on what sort of vendor you're buying your SAN from, they may be specialized pieces of hardware that are designed by that SAN vendor, or in a lot of cases, those disks are really just drives that vendor OEMs from somewhere else and repackages into a nice form that fit inside of the SAN. Now, that SAN also has that bit of firmware we talked about too, but the firmware is really nothing more than SAN software. Today, not a lot of SAN vendors make use of their own proprietary operating systems for actually driving the SAN. In most cases, SAN software is essentially a software application that runs atop a very tailored down instance or distribution of Linux or Windows storage server. And that connection medium is typically, in the case of iSCSI, is your common everyday NICs, or in the case of Fiber Channel, you have HBAs, and obviously you have that label like we talked about too. This is really what goes inside of that traditional SAN. Right, but if we think about these software-based SANs, how are these software-based SANs a little bit different than the traditional SANs? Right? If I think about a software application that I install to a server to actually turn that server into a storage network, well, what do I have then? Well, first of all, I have a set of disks. Right? Those disks may be the disks that are in the server. I may have some extra ones lying around that I plug into that server, or I may even buy some disks and install those into server hardware. Well, and then I have a bit of firmware as well, that's SAN software, which, well, it's an application that runs on top of Linux, or in many cases Windows Server, maybe not Windows Storage Server, but Windows Server. And we have that same connection medium. It's everyday NICs for iSCSI, it's HBAs for Fiber Channel. And a label, well, you can draw up your own label if you want and slap it on the front of that server. Really, the difference between a software SAN and a hardware SAN is that hardware SAN is a specific device. But it really has the same components in on the inside when you really think about it, right? Really, iSCSI SAN software is available today that you may be interested in using in your production environments, and specifically your VMware vSphere environments. This is an example of how that SAN may look. It's specifically a StarWind SAN. In this case, the StarWind software is actually installed to a server. That server then exposes some iSCSI-based LUNs to a number of ESX servers here in the middle, and those ESX servers have a number of virtual machines on the top that are running some sort of workload for our environment. Now, in this architecture, right, I have a number of ESX servers that are running a number of virtual workloads, and those ESX servers connect to that SAN. Now, this is a great solution for us, but wait a minute, there's something missing here.